Hey guys, welcome back. This week I have Dr. David Evans with me. He is currently serving as the pastor at Springfield Baptist Church, and that's in Springfield, Tennessee, for all my Missouri listeners. We're going to spend some time talking about the importance of the daily crucifying of self and how to deal with the nefarious actions of others in the pastorate. Welcome back to the Speak Life podcast. Everyone, welcome back for another episode of the Speak Life podcast. This week I have Dr. David Evans. He is the pastor at Springfield Baptist Church in Springfield, Tennessee, not Springfield, Missouri, for those of you who are used to hearing people from that area. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, brother. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for joining me today. I'm excited. This is the first time we've had a chance to connect in years,
It's
so
been
this is
some
pretty
time.
exciting.
Bill, I've
Yeah.
missed you. Let me just say that. I've
Yeah.
missed you. So
Likewise, the conversations are good, man, when we get to talk. So David and I were in New Orleans in the doctoral program at the same time. It's how we actually met. Without further ado, David, why don't you talk a little bit about yourself, your family, history, and ministry, things like that?
Yeah, so I'm pastoring in my hometown. So I'm born and raised in Springfield, Tennessee. And so when Jesus says a prophet's not accepted in his own hometown, Bill, I have felt every single syllable. It's very an emotional verse for me. So yeah, so
Yeah.
know exactly how that feels. My grandfather was the fire chief here. His picture is plastered across our fire station. My wife's maiden name is across the middle school, now the magnet school. And so we're so deeply rooted here that when my kids get to be dating age, we're going to have to move. So, because we got
Yeah.
cousins, man, that we don't know of. We don't want to reunite the family tree and that kind of thing. So, but to minister in my hometown is a huge privilege. But it does come with unique issues, but also just privileges, honestly,
Yeah.
because I know everybody and everybody knows me, and I can't go anywhere in our area
Yeah.
without somebody knowing, like, that's James and Judy's son, or that's Stephanie's husband, or that's Jackson and Emma's dad, so which is really cool. So it's been a lot of fun. So from here, I didn't come from a pastoral life or family. My dad, a blue collar pipe fitter. He installed sprinklers for 42 years of his life. So thus the whole, I feel real comfortable in flannel. I was raised to chop
Yeah.
wood, work really hard, dig in, and use my hands. And that's kind of how I was raised. Just serve, serve, serve. I can't tell you how many churches we were part of where man, we were cutting the grass, we were knocking concrete out to reinstall pipe, whatever it was.
Yeah.
That was my family's MO in churches. If something needed to be done, we just did it. And so I come to a church where hard work isn't a thing. It's just kind of what we do. And then lo and behold, man, it was February 14th of 1997. The Lord instilled in me a very specific call to step away from my trajectory, which was going to be medicine, and go into ministry. I did not know what to do. I had no idea. I wasn't even for
Yeah.
sure if I believed in all this. So I reflect back at that time as kind of being a practical atheist. Um,
Hmm.
I practiced Christianity because I didn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But Bill, I don't even know if I didn't make it my own. I didn't adopt my parental faith. So I went through about 3 years at that point, just trying to say, okay, if I'm going to commit my whole life, which seems to be pretty valuable to me, is this thing real? And so, man, I read through the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu books, all the volumes, the Quran, the Hadith. Man, I was searching. I was really, really
Yeah.
searching, and the whole time, still trying to be a good kid because I did not want to upset anybody. So after that track, finally went from atheism to theism to monotheism to Christianity, and so then I'm like, all right, I think I'm here. And our BCM at Austin P, I went to Austin P, and ended up with a philosophy major because they said that would be good for seminary. I don't know, but it helped, I guess.
All right.
Then I went to Southern Seminary because I didn't know what else to do. And I said, what do I get? They're like, just start with the MDiv. I'm like, okay, I don't even know what that is. So I got that, and then I still didn't know enough of the Bible. So I got a THM from Southern in apologetics. And the whole time when I was at seminary, I didn't want to be on the sidelines, so I planted a church. Why not, Bill? Why
Yeah.
not? 22 years old, let's
Yeah.
just start a church in my hometown. So North American Mission Board heard. I was a Nehemiah project planner. I don't know how that happened.
How about that?
The Lord blessed, because insurance was great, and the support was great, and the funding was great, and because I didn't have any support before that, our association kicked me in the teeth and in the face, a lot, a whole lot, but I was so hard headed. I'm like, I will be a part of our association, because if I die, I need our church to have a support. So I went
Yeah.
through that, got a THM, ended there, and then ended up where you and I met at New Orleans. Got a
Yeah.
THM there, and then ended up finishing the PhD. And through that time, went from church planting to denominational work. I was the director of evangelism for the Tennessee Baptist Mission Board, and now I sit as the pastor of the church in my hometown, Springfield Baptist. So educationally, ministerially, that's kind of, yeah. And there's all
Yeah.
these
Kind of
little
where you've been.
tidbits in between that, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the ministerial description, and of course you got the whole family thing. We're like married, kids, family, yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Keeps you
that's,
hopping.
dude, it keeps you hopping, but it's that strength, it's that backbone for making all that ministerial. You
Yeah.
know,
Absolutely.
jumps. It's that support you need. Yeah, man. So
Absolutely. Okay. So you're coming from a a varied background. You've had the chance to
yeah,
do some church planning. You've had the chance to do evangelism work with it was the state convention in Tennessee,
yeah,
right, where you were doing it.
yeah.
And then,
I don't know how I
uh,
ended up there either. By the way, like, it's
yeah,
amazing.
yeah. Well, I mean, you ended up going through that work, and now you're
yeah.
a pastor at the local church. So you've had lots of different ways that you've interacted with ministry and interacted
Yes.
with pastors
Yes.
through what you've done. And so
Yeah.
that ties well into the big questions we typically ask, which are, what are the top 2 or 3 greatest challenges you've seen or personally experienced in ministry?
Yeah.
And then what are the top 2 or 3 suggestions you give for dealing with those challenges? So based on what you've seen and experienced through that background, where do you want to begin? What have been some challenges to
Those
deal
are
with?
big questions, Bill. Those are really big
Hmm.
questions, man. So, and I don't know exactly how everybody answers. When I thought about it, I went from I was redefining some of the question, like, what are some of my biggest frustrations, which is one set of answers. What is
Right.
my biggest struggles, which is a whole nother set of answers, and then kind of blending of the two. Um, and and for me, I do have, probably my biggest struggle is not my biggest frustration, but then I have a huge struggle that is my largest frustration. And it boils down to, my frustration appears when I don't have control, which is a total sin
Mm.
issue. Total sin issue, man. Total
Yeah.
sin issue. And it goes back to, I think, my biggest struggle. And this is my 25th year of vocational ministry. I was an associate pastor, church
Yep.
planner, denominational guy, now pastor. Like, um, the out of all these 25 years, and I didn't know how to say this, because I don't want to come across as a guy that's like, trying to over spiritualize things, or like, um, holier than thou, or like, man, let me just hit something that hits all of us. Kind of, I don't. But honestly,
Yeah.
I guess that's what you're wanting. Just honestly, my biggest issue has been self.
Yeah.
100%. The fight that I have, um, with my own personal sin. Um, and dude, I'm not robbing banks. I'm not out there immoral
Right.
relationship, nothing like that. But like, there's still like the need to feel respected,
Mm.
um, the need
Yeah.
for self ambition. Like, when do I stop? Just
Yeah.
going at it. Um, my self reliance, where
Yep.
I get in and I solve the problem. I listed a few others just to make sure. My need to be liked. Like, I
Oh
want
yeah.
people
That's
to
a
like me, Bill.
yeah.
That's why I laugh a lot. I want people to like me and stuff. Anger, anger. I've
Hmm.
not lost my temper since I've been a kid, because I am 32 years in Wateroo karate. And I'm still practicing. My family's in karate now. And so
Nice.
it helps kind of cut that edge, that I've got. Like, there's something that every Tuesday and Thursday, Bill, when you get punched in the face and you're able to punch somebody in the face, it feels divine.
I Yeah, that's there's maybe a different conversation to have there, David. I'm just saying.
I don't know if you can edit that or publish that, but there is
Yeah.
something about that physicality
Oh
that
no, we're
there's.
publishing it. I think that's got to go out. But I'm just wondering if for other pastors, like, find a class if you want to do that, right?
Yeah, do that,
That's
do
not
that.
for the
Yeah.
deacons meeting. That's not for the deacons meeting. So find a
But
place, find a way.
when you're at odds with somebody and you're like, listen, we could go out in the parking lot and like handle this like grade school boys if you want to. I'm so good with
Yep.
that. Nobody takes you up on the offer, but
Yep.
they don't know how serious I
Oh
am. I'm like, I
man.
can do this. So yeah,
Yeah. For
so
those of you who've listened to previous episodes, that is not the way we talk about conflict management, just for the record. That's that's
yeah,
not the
that's right.
recommended technique.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. So all these self things, man, like these just sins that I have, because people talk down to you in ministry, they
Oh yeah.
underappreciate you, you're under resourced, and then you got nefarious actions of people that are always gunning at you because you may not be if you're an effective pastor, wonderful, but you're in the position
Hmm.
that people are just gunning after, and if they can undercut you, boy, they will undercut you in a heartbeat. And so anyway, the my attitude to be able to sit in a room of people and they say the most foul thing, the most degrading thing, they make fun of you,
Yeah.
for me, I can feel my heart palpitate a little extra, my blood pressure kind of rise a tad. In those
Yeah.
moments, I haven't had a moment where I don't think I've had a moment. I mean, maybe I have, and nobody's pointed out where I've lost it, and I just let them have it and stuff like that. I've not done that, but yet but my biggest struggle is that that's there. It
Yeah.
exists, and my thing, like Bill, every day crucifying self, crucifying my need to
Yeah.
feel validated, appreciated, liked, and all that. Golly, dude, I think that is my biggest struggle, and honestly, I think for real, I think that's everybody's biggest struggle, because it's a daily battle. It really
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. So here's part of what I'm trying to think through on that, because one of the very first things you mentioned was respect, the idea of the
Yeah,
need to be respected.
yeah,
So here's part of what I'm trying to parse out. Like, I think within us, I'm trying to parse out the difference between what God has built into us as part of our function. And here's where I'm taking that from, specifically thinking about guys. And I'm thinking about in Ephesians 5, that passage is talking about marriage. It starts with submitting yourselves to one another out of reverence for Christ, which there's a whole separate message about why you have to start at that verse and not in verse 22. But it goes through there. And at the end of that passage, talking about the husband and wife relationship, it doesn't use the word submit. It actually uses the word respect. Wives, respect your husbands. And there's some interesting thoughts out there. Emerson Eggerichs is one who talks about this in his love and respect curriculum. And it's the idea that men have this basic need to be respected. That's maybe different from what women experience. And it
yeah,
makes me wonder, in this context, thinking about in ministry, how do we deal with the idea that there's something built into us that desires, that craves that respect? But where does it cross the line into a sin problem where it's been elevated above what we do to serve the Lord,
yeah,
and where we put Jesus in terms of priority? And I guess maybe that's the answer to the question. If respect, the need for respect, is elevated in priority above the need to obey Jesus, then that
yeah,
we've gotten things out of whack, and we've kind of turned it into an idol instead
yeah.
of just understanding that need and how it's meant to fit in our world.
Yeah. Am I able to work with a sinful, broken, rebellious person to the goal of their salvation and their sanctification in a way that I'm willing to lay down my personal need for respect?
Yeah.
Because if I'm working with somebody that's broken, they may not know how. They may not have the mechanisms to be able to respect me. They may need
Hmm.
behavior modification to know that what they do say is so disrespectful, but they don't get it because they're so entrenched in their own sin. that my need
Yep.
for respect in those moments cannot oversee kind of like the their need for salvation, redemption, and sanctification. And so that's the goal. Like, can I crucify myself for those moments
Yep.
where I
Mm.
pour into somebody, and no matter how they come at me, Bill, it's not going to ting, man. It's not going to ping at all. Like, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
hard. That's really, really hard, especially when somebody's gouging intentionally to get your emotions to go awry, so they can create this ad hominem argument
Yep.
that they attack your character to win their position that may have nothing to do with your character,
Yep.
right? And so if I lose my cool, I lose the battle, maybe lose the war, but
Yeah.
I'm not perfect.
Yeah.
Absolutely not perfect. And so there has to be grace and forgiveness in that environment. But if you're really pleading and working for the souls of people, and like myself, I was dumped into this church, and they told me on the very front end that it is just a war. There's fights. There's no respect. And Bill, there's a statement that I had apparently in the first 2 years that I said so often, that a guy made two metal signs, and he said,
Mm.
put them anywhere you want to, and it says, "Be nice or leave." So I,
Man.
I have one over the pastoral office, and I have one over our conference room where most of those wars are happening. And so many times, dude, I'm like, listen, we don't have to agree on anything, but you are going to be kind.
Yeah.
So, and I was telling people my parents' age this. I'm like, I shouldn't have to do that. But they
Yeah.
knew, and they had 40 years worth of practice, gouging
Oh
at
yeah.
pastoral leadership, just inflaming power, that the pastoral leadership, they were pros at it. And so I come bebopping in, and yeah, I have to
Yeah.
crucify a lot of myself so I could survive, I could be effective, and I can accomplish the mission God's got for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know as well as I do that. I mean, there are plenty of churches out there that have that chewing up, spitting out
Oh
pastors
my
kind of
gosh, yeah.
idea, and it happens.
Yeah.
And so the need to intentionally take the back seat. I'll tell you, for whatever reason, it's making me think about, and probably just its proximity, just because I just talked about it yesterday. I'm teaching a Bible study with a small group at my church on Colossians right now. We're going through Colossians 1, and so just thinking about in that passage from around about verse 15 through verse 23, where it's talking about the supremacy and the sufficiency of Jesus Christ,
Mm.
and the idea of the absolute authority that he has in our world, that who we are,
Yeah.
by our nature and by our deeds, by what we do, we're sinners.
Yeah.
It's who we are.
Yeah.
We are prone to messing up, and Jesus has absolute authority over that.
Yeah.
And so when I think about that in this context of thinking through ministry and crucifying self, dying to self, if he's the one who has the authority over not only us but our ministries, the things we're doing, then he did that knowing that we were going to mess up and
Yeah.
that we're prone to messing up, and put us in those positions anyway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're not big enough and powerful enough to screw those up
Yeah.
if he's got an agenda, if he's got a plan in mind. And so
Yeah.
there's some release that allows us, I think, to crucify self when we recognize the fullness of who Jesus is.
Yeah, and it's that release, Bill. It's that release that I think that many that causes that when we don't have that release, it causes so much burnout with pastors,
Yeah.
because you wake up in the middle of the night and you remember that face, you remember the tone of voice, and you're just infuriated. And that much stress all the time causes heart attack, causes
Yep.
burnout, causes pastoral suicide, like all these negative things. We don't have any kind of release, but man, like these
Yep.
happen in our life. So how do you pace yourself? How in the world do we make it 40 years in vocational ministry, dying to self, and crucifying that self, where you're letting that stuff go?
Yeah.
I never want to unbalance or imbalance scripture, but John 3:30, where I decrease and Christ must increase, John the Baptist kind
Mm-hmm.
of mentality, is kind of that thought. And I think for me, it's a lifelong project, to continue to bury myself, and my need for affirmation. That's another thing. Like,
Yeah.
if I don't hear something positive, like I just dry up and die and think, man, what am I doing wrong? And I struggle with that. every single week I struggle with that. And I have to realize, there's another measurement that I need to start valuing myself
Yeah.
with. But if you're like, my love language is words of affirmation. So
Mm-hmm.
I, I go there. I'm not quality time. I'm not gifts. I'm not all that, but man, it is that words of affirmation. And so too much value goes into that, into my self promotion, that I have to crucify. And it's so hard to do that. Yeah, but I think there's a lot of guys that get caught up in that and they end up getting burnout, having heart attacks, committing suicide,
Yeah.
something of that sort. And we've got to learn how to pace. We got to learn how to crucify. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And so part of what well, I'm hearing here in terms of thinking about crucifying self is, to an extent, there's a little bit of, you need to know yourself. You need to know your
yeah,
limits here,
yeah,
which Jesus will show you. He will help you to see those things, right?
yeah,
If you pray and start seeking that out,
yeah,
he's going to help you to get it. But like, so here's an example I'm thinking of. We're talking about respect. We're talking about affirmation and needing that from others. Uh, I don't know about you, and I have a feeling I'm not the only one here as far as thinking through listeners and stuff who's dealt with this. But I know I can do something like I'll speak in chapel here at SBU, and I can have 100 attaboys, and if there's one, man, I didn't like this. This was a challenge. I didn't like what you said here.
yep,
Anything like that.
yep,
That's the piece I remember.
yep.
That is 100%. That's
Oh,
what
it
I will
burns.
focus
Oh,
in
it
on,
burns.
and it's just not useful.
Yeah,
And it's just not useful at all.
yeah,
It can be useful in hearing the criticism and recognizing, okay, is there something I really need to change there? But
yeah,
when you let that be the thing that is the primary voice, when there was 100 other voices that said something different,
yeah,
it's
yeah. When I
yeah,
got here to this church, 40 years decline, all this animosity. They gave me 32 hours worth of interview before I got here. And here's how the interview went.
wow,
The first 30 minutes, there were like 8 4-hour sessions of interview. The first 30 minutes, it was just normal interview. I asked questions, they asked questions. And then the next 3 to 3.5 hours was them telling me how bad it was here. Because they're like, we don't want you to be ill prepared, but this is
yeah,
really tough, really bad. And so there's a couple things that I did on the front end that I don't know if I would do now, but I did. But I knew that, like, disrespect, like they just talk down to you, and you're young, David, and you're 45, but I don't know, whatever.
yeah,
And so all these certifications and degrees, I put them on a wall on the outside of my office, not in my office, but they're on the outside. So you're walking, you kind of see them and stuff. And that's old guy say, man, she got a lot on the wall there. I'm like, yeah, yeah. He's like, how many of those do you need? And I'm like, I don't know. And he's a friendly guy. He's a farmer. He's wonderful.
yeah,
His heart. He's just very commonsensical. But I think that one question, it really did hit home of like, why, what is the purpose of that on the wall? For me, I was using it as, you have a place that traditionally does not respect leadership or follow, and is always trying to change the control point. All this, it's
yeah,
revitalization, dude. Revitalization. So I'm like, well, I'm not ever going to say you must call me Dr. Evans. I'm not doing
right,
that. But yet there should be some reminder that, hey, this ain't my first rodeo. Like I've done a
yeah,
few things. Like I think I know before I say something. I got a little bit of research behind this.
yeah,
And that was part of what I put on there. And a part of that, Bill, is self-reliance.
yeah,
Me relying on my accolades to set a scene so that I could be trusted, right? And
yep,
so where in that story is it that I'm like, Lord, I'm crucifying myself, and you're just going to have to set the path. You know, you've brought me this far, and they know. So
yeah,
that was a mechanism that was a self-reliant mechanism. And so I have to crucify those things. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we have to be willing to be aware of where those weaknesses are, where
Yeah.
those things are in our world that need to be uh, put in check,
Yeah.
so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And surrendered to the Lord is what it really is,
Yeah.
and allow Him to take care of those things. So I
Yeah.
know this wasn't the only topic you wanted to talk about, but I think I know this ties into crucifying self. If it comes to the other part of what you're wanting to talk about, has to do with dealing with others when they're not doing good things.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
that this ties directly into it. So why don't you
Yeah.
talk about
Yeah.
that other idea?
So the first part of this, like crucifying self, is not the frustrating part because I'm in control of that. It
Mm,
doesn't bother me, I guess, on my end at times because at any time I can click that off. Um, the other struggle that I have seen in the past 25 years that does frustrate me to the core are just the nefarious actions of others, and
yep.
that the devil hates us. The devil's going to use people to kind of undermine, to be
Yep.
disrespectful, to attack, to just gossip and slander and things of that sort. And I tell you what, Bill, that's one of my biggest struggles because I am naive to a point where
Mm,
if 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 I meet you, I trust you automatically. I love you. I will give you my house. Like I'm naive to that point. I don't have mechanisms or things for you to go through for me to build that trust. You don't have to earn it. I'm just automatically there. But then here's another side.
yeah.
Once you've burned the bridge, it's hard to build that back, and that's a struggle for me too. Once
Yeah.
somebody really royally messes up, if in my head or if my experience, if I have figured out that that was all intentional and malicious, dude, I don't
Yep.
really come back, in full trust. Uh, do I love? Yeah, yeah. Any of these people can call me from the hospital, and I'm there in a heartbeat to pray over them. But yet, man,
Yep.
my trust level for humanity, for people, really is a struggle because you see why the church struggles because the church is not some abstract organization, 501c3.
Yeah.
It's people, and we're in the people business. And people fail themselves all the time. And when you're in the seat of a pastor, man, they're gunning at you. Um,
Yeah.
so the nefarious actions of folks, how they come and they sit with you and they act like they're trusting you and all this kind of stuff, and you talk with them, and then they take what you say and they leave and they turn it around on you. It
Yeah.
really, really frustrates you because you're in the church for crying out loud. You
Yeah.
should be able to trust people. And two, I mean, how does that help the overall mission? Which apparently the overall mission is not the overall mission. It's just my mission. My mission is Great Commission, and maybe that's not everybody's mission. And then you
Yeah.
realize even more frustrating news that maybe we're not all here trying to accomplish the same thing. Um, but it hurts. Cloud and Townsend, obviously, the book Boundaries,
Right.
that huge book. I've read it for years, and I keep reading over that for some reason. Learning how to put up appropriate boundaries, like even in church, and when
Yeah.
people know how to act, they're welcomed in. When they don't know how to act, okay, there needs to be a little boundary set up. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's huge.
This conversation, thinking about boundaries in particular, was a conversation I just had with my counseling students the other day.
Mm,
Uh, because it's a similar issue, and I circled them back to the question, like, in scripture, do we see boundaries? And
yeah.
I'll even ask it a different way: did Jesus have boundaries?
Mm,
Because there's
yeah.
a whole bunch of people in the church, and it's usually a group of people in the church who themselves don't have great boundaries, who think,
Yeah.
no, Jesus didn't have any boundaries. And that's not the Jesus I
Yeah,
see
yeah,
in
that's
the
right.
Bible.
There was a
Right.
mountain that he went to and he got away from folks. That seems like a pretty good boundary right
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, in the habit on a regular basis of breaking away just to spend some one-on-one time with the Father
Yeah.
and not letting things interrupt it.
Yeah, that's right. That's
That seems
right.
like a good boundary. Having
Pretty good.
times where he was intentionally, like he had times when he was intentionally speaking to large crowds, but then he also had times when he was intentionally just working with his 12.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then times when he would break out with just a small group of 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
When it comes to helping people and ministering to people, here's one of the things I think about. Jesus went in different places and was healing people, right? Like he went to the pool of Bethesda and was there, and there was a paralytic who was laying down and needed healed, and he healed him.
Yeah.
But how many other people did he walk past that he didn't heal every single one of them?
That's it. Yeah. Yeah. A
Right?
question I've helped other people ask all the time. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. He wasn't just always all the time on doing things for everybody without thought. There was structure to what he did, and he was intentional about
Yeah.
how he did what he did, at least what I'm seeing in scripture. And I think it's interesting that hiding in that is we've got a passage in the Gospels that says, by the way, if you're struggling with how to rest, come to me,
Yeah.
you who are weary and heavy laden, I will teach you how to do it. Watch the way I do things.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the issue of boundaries is something that is, I think, very scriptural in nature.
Hmm.
It's something we see modeled in Christ, but it's easy in today's culture, I think, to think, well, no, the church we shouldn't be doing that stuff. We just need to be continuing to pour ourselves out, and we are in the business of pouring ourselves out, but we got to have something to pour out.
Yeah. That's
We
right.
can't just be constantly pouring out and never be replenished.
Yeah. Yeah. There's this codependency that we build upon people because we do have this need to be liked, appreciated, used, and we feel like it's a point of relevance for us. And so we build these systems that have no boundaries to them. And we
Mm-hmm.
expect people. And then what happens is, we let people that are willing to burn the whole house down, burn the whole house down because we have no
Yeah.
boundaries. If somebody talks bad or talks smack to us, that kind of thing, do we set up a boundary, in such a way that they're not allowed to do that again? You
Yeah.
know, I told a story yesterday. We're talking about marriage, and I was told by a previous pastor years ago that there's a guy in this particular church that chased his wife and stuff like that
Mm.
because he was attracted to his wife. And I'm like, what did you do? And we kind of have a different opinion on how to handle that. Last year, and I told this story yesterday, or a year and a half ago or something, there was a guy that was, chasing my wife and
Mm.
that kind of thing. My wife's a very kind individual, and there was an event that she went to, and he was super kind, overboard, buying her stuff, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so she comes home. She's like, hey, something interesting happened. And so she told me, I'm like, okay, all right, well, let's, and then another event goes. I'm not there. It happens again, a little bit more flirtatious from his point. So I'm like, all right. And so the third event I happen to be at. And so she kind of gives me a high sign. She's like, hey,
Yeah.
this is the guy. So I was allowed at that moment, Bill, to be able to pull him aside and set a very clear boundary. Hasn't talked with my wife, Actually, whenever
Yeah.
he sees us in public, he goes the other direction as the instructions told him. So,
Yeah.
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 And again, that may not jive exactly with the whole conflict resolution thing, but yet I think there is a time that you do have to set very clear boundaries. And who is it
Oh
that
yeah.
sustains that boundary? Or when you have a wolf knock down a part of your boundary, who puts it back up? The wolf is not going to. You
Mm-mm.
have to put that boundary up. You have to be strong enough and resilient enough to maintain those boundaries, to communicate those boundaries. But with every boundary, too, my wife always loves to point this out. There's always gates. There are always gates, and they go both
Yeah.
ways. And so in
Yeah.
every boundary, there has to be a gate. Why? Because there has to be a place for forgiveness and mercy,
Yeah.
reconciliation, that kind of thing. But yeah, without the strength to be able to set those boundaries, man, people will run all over you and burn your house down. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that I think about with that, so I suspect that there would be people who would listen to this, and they would hear what you talked about, that you had a conversation, that you set some really firm boundaries, and they would hear that and go, I have no
Yeah,
idea
right.
how to do that. Uh, Learning how to, and so this does fit into conflict management a little bit. And here's what I mean by that: that if you grew up in a house where conflict was not done well,
Yeah.
whether it was just never handled, or there was lots of yelling, screaming, throwing things, or somebody was really belligerent, uh, there's it's not a chance. There's a reality that for you, if you've never been intentional about it, learning how to deal with those things and set some of those kinds of boundaries is going to be, it's going to take an intentional effort
Yeah.
on your part.
Yeah.
It takes learning how to do that on purpose and being willing to step out and do those things, knowing that you're not going to do it perfect the first time, but that you can get there.
Yeah.
Um,
Bill, when you sent me the invite, you had said, how are some ways that I've learned how to kind of get through some of these struggles, and setting these boundaries. I'm by nature, not nurture, but nature confrontational. It's
mhm.
easy for me to face with somebody. I enjoy thrive in moments that are positive, negative, whatever. I can handle those, but yet I'm still very much an emotional being. And whenever I have like my wife attached to a moment, I
Mhm.
need to make sure my anger and everything is in check. So the things that I have had to put into my life, obviously reading books about it, you cannot go wrong there. But
Yep.
also receiving counsel, either
Yeah.
from a pastor or a therapist. which I'm married to one, so it's very valuable, or other pastors, and just seeking professional wisdom from other people is invaluable, because when
Yeah.
you're walking through that, you're going to make mistakes. Let's try to lessen the mistakes. Let's accomplish the purpose and seek wisdom amongst godly counselors in that
Yep.
season. And obviously, your quiet time. That goes without saying.
Yep.
Nose
100%.
in the word, praying really hard, fasting, doing all those things, because you never want to go and set a boundary that you're going to have to pick up and move because you said it wrong.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep. Yep. That's all good, man. Okay, so I'm hating that we're about out of time, but we are out of time. You mentioned I normally would ask about what maybe books, podcasts, things like that, what other resources, and you've already mentioned Boundaries is a great book. If it's not a book you've ever heard of,
Yeah.
it's one that's worth checking out. Any other final words before we kind of wrap things up for today?
Thank you, Bill, for your
Oh,
friendship.
absolutely.
We met each other just briefly and then had some time together and stuff like that. And so what you do is invaluable. So thank you for this, teaching students and continuing to pour in to them. So if there is someone that is in need, I know that Tennessee, for example, has a number called 988. That if you're ever
Yep.
in crisis or something like that and you don't know where to turn, just call 988. If you don't know where to turn from there, call your mission board, your state convention, or you can
Yep.
text me, and I'm sure Bill would be available too. Like if there is crisis or something, you have to reach out. All of us have.
Yep.
There's been times that all of us have, and it has been so invaluable. And so God is using folks. And the fact of the matter is, when the devil hates you, he only attacks those people that are doing effective
Yep.
things in his kingdom. And so if you're under attack, be affirmed. You're doing some great things, but you got to
Yep.
have the troops come in to support you. So don't fight by yourself. We all need a village. We all need a
Yep.
village. So, Bill, thank you. Even brief, when we hung out, you became part of the village, encouragement. You've
Yeah.
been encouraging in this. And so it's just
Likewise.
valuable, brother. Yeah.
Likewise. I appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for being on. For all of you listening, thank you for joining us today. God bless you, and we'll have a new episode for you next week. God bless.